Hello everyone, welcome to this new episode of Photobag Magazine. Every first Saturday of the month, I'll be offering a review of my photography gear in practice, summarizing news from the brands I use, from my partners, and my work schedule. My comments are solely my own. The products featured are not sponsored unless I specifically mention it. I'd be delighted to engage with you in a constructive spirit. Trolls and grumblers will be systematically banished. This month, we will go back to the origins of the rules of composition in photography. In order to better master them, and sometimes break away from them, then we will return to the visit to the exhibition dedicated to Robert Doisneau in Paris. Today we are going to talk about composition. Composing your image means choosing the elements you want to include, the ones you don't, and how those elements are distributed in the space and in the depth. In short, it's a subjective, often unconscious choice that comes down to individual taste. The time you have to take the shot and the capabilities of your gear, sensor size, focal lengths, and lens aperture. The rules of composition have evolved over the 200 years that photography has existed, initially linked to shooting constraints, then to break free from academic standards, while nevertheless maintaining a series of golden rules. I suggest we look together at where these rules come from. Ever since 15th century Italian painters succeeded in rendering the effects of perspective on a flat surface, artists have long sought the perfect composition, both in proportions, the positioning of subjects, and the arrangement of colors. Until the 19th century, working in the studio allowed artists to arrange nature to organize it according to their conception of aesthetics. With the naturalistic painter's movement, Barbizon school, the approach evolved, and the artist had to compose while taking into account their environment, which they didn't fully control. Millet set up his easel in a field and captured the work of the peasants. It is the artist who positions themselves in relation to their subject, not the subject that is arranged. Here, Millet distributes 3 planes, the 3 characters, then the haystacks, and finally the village in the background. The vanishing line starts from the bottom right to follow the backs of the characters, ending on the ground on the left. Reading towards the left evokes the past. While painting took centuries to leave the studio, photography returned there in its early days. The first photographers therefore composed their images like painters in the studio due to the weight of the cameras and the management of light. This resulted in very formal portraits, posed as in this photo of Karl Marx. No perceptible movement, a very studied pose, ultimately no spontaneity. Paradoxically, it was initially the advances in the darkroom that drove the evolution of the photographic approach. More than questions of framing during shooting, collage and superimposition inspired the artists of the early 20th century. Man Ray transformed the female body into a musical instrument. Then he played with the scientific discoveries of his time, such as X-rays for this image as early as 1920. But quite quickly, the technical evolution of cameras regained the upper hand over the creativity of artists, democratizing the practice of photography. When speed liberates from the beginning of the 20th century, engineers sensed the potential represented by photographic practice, freed from its weight constraints with unprecedented ease of use. While Kappa was still using a rather bulky camera in 1936, it would take another 20 years for Leica to invent the 24x36 format in 1954 with the M model. Beyond the format and the camera itself, the most significant progress was made in the fields of lenses and film. By marketing wide aperture optics, manufacturers allowed exposure times to be drastically reduced. We will cover these technical issues in a future episode. Today, having a lens that opens to f1.2 is no longer reserved for professionals. At Canon, to only talk about one brand I use, a 50mm f1.2 costs $1,500. The other parameter that helps reduce shutter speed is the sensitivity of the film then and the sensor today. Kodak offers a black and white film at 3200 ISO, which makes it possible to maintain manageable speeds even in very low light. Photography was thus able to break free from academic rules to conquer the streets, battlefields, and sports fields, meaning to capture movement. Modernism then replaced pictorialism. Yet some rules of composition seem immutable. Thus, despite the freedom that technique allows, the rule of thirds, so often used in painting, remains a golden rule. The challenge is therefore to compose an image of movement captured spontaneously while composing according to this sacred rule. Cartier-Bresson summarizes this constraint by reminding us that even if the rule guides us and composition is essential, it remains very intuitive at the moment of taking the shot. Cartier-Bresson hoped that manufacturers would never have the idea of engraving a grid on viewfinders, an option that many of us activate on our modern cameras. But do we really pay attention to it when we shoot? This famous photo by Cartier-Bresson, taken in Hyères in 1932, shows that he placed the cyclist on an intersection of the lines of thirds. Did he construct his image, or did he wait for the subject to be in the right place? Only an analysis of the contact sheet could show us how many shots were taken and which one was selected. Like any photographer, I compose my images with this rule in mind. Practicing a lot of landscape photography with a rather slow shooting process, I have time to compose, to make choices, even if it means breaking free from the thirds. Sometimes framing dead center allows for a deliberate and particular rendering. This is the case with a wide angle, such as this classic shot of a pier, or by emphasizing the effect of symmetry as often seen in architectural photography. When Nikon invented the SLR, single lens reflex, with the F model in 1959, it democratized photography by opening it up to the general public. Canon, Pentax, and many others followed. Nikon equipped the viewfinder with a focusing aid more practical than the rangefinder. Two half circles that align when the focus is achieved. Many amateurs would focus on the main subject of the image, but forget to decenter their composition. Thus, many photos from this era place the subject at center in the frame. The art of forgetting the rules, as in all fields, knowing the rules allows you to break free from them. The main thing is to maintain an intention. As we have seen, framing dead center can make sense, just like giving the impression that the subjects are not organized. These are all the aspects that I propose to address during my workshop dedicated to composition, by experimenting in the field with the implementation of these rules. Street photography lends itself well to this exercise because the constraints are numerous. Fleeting moments, imposed positioning, changing light. Together, we will see how to get the best out of what is often based on the photographer's intuition. As I mentioned in the October episode of my online magazine, the Musée Maillol dedicated a beautiful exhibition to Robert Doisneau. This humanist photographer left his mark on Paris from the 1930s to the 1980s with his images. Armed with his Rolleiflex Obas or his Oblique, his pictures are imbued with poetry, humor, and a deep tenderness for humanity. I could have shot a video of my visit to the Robert Doisneau exhibition, but I prefer to take you in his footsteps, as I did during a day of photographic exploration in Paris. Thanks to the lightness of my Leica Q2, I was able to let my inspiration guide me, alternating between typically Parisian landscapes and images of the many passers-by.